Chapter 32, Some Bad Ideas. The election of 1896 was history. Bryan went on to run for president again and again and never made it. He became better known than some of the men who did become president. And what of the populace? What happened to them? Tom Watson was right. Their party was dead. Not quite buried, but almost. And Tom Watson? If only I didn't have to write the truth about Tom Watson, for his is a tragic story. Remember young, idealistic Tom Watson, who began his political career by doing something no other party leader was doing, calling on blacks and whites to unite? For a while it happened. He brought the races together. When a black populist leader was threatened by the racist Ku Klux Klan, Watson called for help. More than 1,000 farmers came in buggies and on horseback. This was the 19th century South, and these were white farmers rushing to the aid of a black man. The farmers stacked their guns on Tom Watson's porch and made it clear they would not allow a lynching. The Klansmen got the message. There was no more trouble. But the People's Party failed. It was too bad, since so many populist ideas were soon accepted by both Republicans and Democrats. Tom Watson took 8 years off from politics and wrote books and thought and brooded and came out a lesser man. Tom Watson ended his days as a bigot. He had been a champion of the common people. He became enamored of white supremacy, prestige, and power. When he died, the largest bunch of flowers at his funeral came from the Ku Klux Klan. By the turn of the century, the Ku Klux Klan was a large, powerful, and widespread organization. It was not confined to the rural South as some people imagined. Watson wasn't the only populist leader to take up bigoted theories. Sadly, it was a time when many Americans, and people in other nations too, took racism seriously. They were grappling with different problems. Life was unsettling in this age of extremes. In America, everyone could see that something was wrong, and not just on the farm. People were becoming too materialistic, too concerned with money and things. The economic system wasn't working well. Industry was ravaging the nation's resources. Thomas Jefferson's agrarian, farm-centered world was vanishing, and the new world of corporation and capitalists didn't seem very noble. For the most part, presidents and congresses were weak, and money magnates and city bosses strong. Railroads and new industries had changed the nation. Laws and ideas hadn't caught up. Some people had a simple solution to the new problems. They blamed others. First, they blamed the rich. Actually, the rich industrials were no different from the poor farmers. Many were greedy, but so were many ordinary people. Some industrialists, like Carnegie and Rockefeller, who had abused and exploited others to gain power and wealth, were doing a surprisingly good job of sharing their wealth. When blaming the rich didn't work, people looked for other scapegoats. Unfortunately, many turned racist. Some were anti-Catholic. Others were anti-Semitic, which means they blamed Jews for their problems. Many Americans became anti-immigrant. Immigrants were competing for jobs. One populist leader called them foreign scum. Some were anti-black. It was at this time that the southern states wrote new constitutions that took the vote away from most blacks and poor whites. On the West Coast, many citizens were anti-Asian. Some Americans lost their way. Their wrong-headedness would hurt the nation. They didn't mean to be wrong. Few do. They were trying to define America. But it was as if they had decided to look through a telescope the wrong way. They narrowed the vision. They were looking backward to a past they thought was ideal. But things had never been quite the way they imagined them. They thought America had once been just a nation of Protestant English farmers. They forgot all about the Native Americans, who had been a majority, and who arrived on the continent thousands of years before the first Europeans. They forgot about the Spaniards, who had settled in Florida and South Carolina and New Mexico and Texas and California. They forgot the Poles, Indians, and Africans who had helped to create Jamestown. They forgot the Swedes in Delaware and the French in Louisiana. They forgot the Catholics in Maryland and the Jews in New Amsterdam. They didn't know their American history. Those 19th century bigots whom we call nativists were ignorant. They forgot that it was our English ancestors who had come up with the idea that all people are created equal. It was that revolutionary idea that was attracting immigrants to America from all over the world. Because of that idea, America was attempting something amazing. We were taking peasants from German farms, children from Poland's shtetls, laborers from China's countryside, Italians from Naples' fishing boats, and former slaves from southern plantations, and expecting them all to get along together. Of course, it wasn't easy. Revolutionary ideas never are. One thing neither the populists nor the Democrats nor the Republicans understood was that the emerging political forces, the immigrants and the newly freed blacks, were helping to build a more fair and far richer America. But that wasn't clear to anyone at the end of the 19th century. Leaving Sicily. If you look at a map and notice the boot that is Italy, you will see that the boot's toe is kicking a triangular rock. That rock is actually an island, the island of Sicily. In 1800, there were 1 million Sicilians. By 1900, there were 3.5 million. In many of the villages, there were just too many people to feed and house. Between 1880 and 1920, more than 3 million immigrants left Sicily and sailed for America. It has been called one of the greatest mass migrations in history. More goods, more challenges. What do you do when you need a shirt? You go to a store and buy one. Before the Civil War, you couldn't do that. Your mother or someone in the family had to make your shirt. If you had plenty of money, you could go to a tailor and have a shirt made especially for you. During the Civil War, soldiers' uniforms were needed in a hurry, so uniforms were made in many sizes in factories. It was amazing. Almost everyone could find something to fit. After the war, manufacturers started making clothing for the civilians, people who weren't in the military. In the cities, new department stores began selling factory-made clothes, shoes, and things for the house and garden. Do you remember how you felt when you were little and went into a big toy store for the first time? That's the way most Americans felt when they first entered a department store. The people who couldn't get to the big city stores weren't left out. They could buy factory goods too because of Montgomery Ward's smart idea. Ward decided to sell merchandise through the mail. He printed a catalog that showed pictures of the items. He had for sale. Soon another company, Sears Roebuck, was doing the same thing. If you had the money, here are some items you could order from the 1909 Sears Roebuck catalog known as the Wish Book. Men's two-piece bathing suits for $2.25, bathing trunks for kids at 20 cents, official National League baseballs at 75 cents, and White Lily face wash, the ladies' favorite, at 37 cents per bottle. The new department stores and the new catalogs brought wonders to the American household. Suddenly, everyone wanted products from American factories. Those factories soon led the world with their good products and low prices. Now anyone could go into a store and buy a fine suit or dress. When Americans got off their boats, all they had to do was go into a store to look American. Factories changed the way people lived and the way they worked. Thomas Jefferson had wanted America to stay agrarian. That word agrarian means farm-based. He wanted the United States to be a nation of small farmers who would have little need for government-like regulations. But there was no keeping the Industrial Revolution out of America. In 1920, half of all Americans lived in cities or towns. By then, the United States was the leading industrial nation in the world, with 9 million factory workers. Most of the factories were in cities or big towns. A new immigrant could get off the boat at Ellis Island, head for New York or Chicago or Cincinnati, and quickly find a job. A farm boy or girl from Iowa or Wisconsin could head for the city and find a world of activity and a job, too. The United States wasn't ready for the changes that cities and industry brought. There were new situations and problems that had not been faced before. At the beginning of the 20th century, we were the greatest industrial power in the world. But a huge gap had opened, a chasm between the opportunities available to rich Americans and to rural and urban poor. Giving everyone a chance, that was the great challenge to a nation that prided itself on its founding documents, which were all about fairness and equality and opportunity.